Fintech Chatter. Brought to you by Tier 1 People, leaders in Fintech executive search. Welcome to Fintech Chatter, the show where I connect with Fintech leaders for a bit of a chat. I'm your host, Dexter Cousins, and in today's show, I'm joined by a really special guest, Bianca Bates, Chief Client Officer of Cuscal. Bianca was last on the show almost 3 years ago, and she did just such an amazing job of explaining Cuscal that I thought rather than me doing the introduction, I'd get Bianca to do it.
Thanks, Dexter. Cuscal, we are an end-to-end provider of all payment services in the Australian market. We have all of the licensing and connectivity of the major banks. So there's the major banks and Cuscal who can effectively enable all payment channels in the Australian market. Our clients, there's just over 100 of them, and they are made up of the mutual sector, who were the founders of Cuscal many years ago, actually over about 60 years ago. And then we have other banking clients such as ING and Bendigo, as well as fintechs, corporate acquirers, paytechs. So we have a really sort of broad segment of clients.
Awesome. Now we're going to be talking today a lot, Bianca, about the role that Cuscal's been playing in the fintech startup ecosystem, being a real enabler of the ecosystem, particularly over the last 5 years or so. But before we kind of talk about that, your role as Cuscal Chief Client Officer, what does that entail?
Yeah, so Chief Client Officer, I lead our product and service teams. So we have 5 product domains. So we have our issuing, switching domain, fraud, payments, which includes MPP, as well as CDR and acquiring. So I lead the product domains as well as all of our client-facing teams. So all of our relationship management, partnership management teams, contact centers, operations, and sales. And
how big is Cuscal in terms of people?
We've got about 700 people.
Wow. So it's a pretty sizable organization.
It is.
And talking about, I guess, what we've seen within fintech, there's a lot of kind of a really rich history of innovation from Cuscal. That when I first had you on the show, it's still one of my favorite shows, right? Because my mind was blown by the firsts that the organization's responsible for. Can you talk through some of those? Because not everybody watching might have listened to that podcast.
Yeah, we do have a lot of proud firsts at Cuscal, starting back in the 1970s, where we introduced the first ATM to Australia, which was pretty cool.
Really?
Before that, people were having to go to a branch to get cash out Monday to Friday, whatever hours the bank was open. So it started there back in the 70s. Fast forward, we were the first to do a contactless payment in Australia, Visa PayWave. First to launch anywhere in the world, in fact, with over 30 brands going live with Apple Pay and the other pays in the Australian market, pretty close to first in the Australian market. But the world first was so many brands on one day.
Yeah.
Then MPP, Pay2 going live first. So a lot of proud firsts that we've achieved.
So it's kind of such a great story as well, because Cuscal is kind of like the original challenger to the big 4 banks, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, we don't see ourselves competing to the big 4. In fact, we're happy to enable anyone.
Right.
Really, the problem that we're looking to solve is connectivity and capacity. So we do have the connectivity to all payment rails and can enable anyone. So I think that's kind of the big enabler that we do have. So new entrants coming to the Australian market that are looking to compete, whether they're a bank or an acquirer, paytech, we can enable them. So I think the connectivity is the first problem to be solved. Capacity is probably the other big one. So with our connectivity and capacity, we're dealing with all of the back end connectivity and enabling our clients to focus on the front end, which is exactly what the fintechs are excellent at doing, like that connectivity layer that's dealing directly with their customers, whether that be consumers or whether it be businesses. So we're managing the back end, giving you capacity to work on the front end customer experience. They're the really big things. I think the other thing that we've worked really hard on over the last probably 3 years as a big focus is time and cost to market. We know as business cases get approved, as capital is released into fintechs, they're looking to get to market as soon as possible, not wait years for connectivity. So that's another problem that we're looking to solve, is being able to get to market as soon as possible with the most advanced innovative payment products available.
And so you mentioned Pay2 before. It's obviously been a whole deal, not only in the media, but obviously within the industry around how slow the uptake has been on that. What's Cuscal been doing to kind of drive that and encourage that?
Yeah, we haven't been going slowly, Dexter. So we were really proud to launch, to go first with Pay2 in the Australian market. And so we've enabled all of our banking clients, payers to go live, I think with the exception of maybe a few. We've also proudly launched payment initiator clients, fintechs, paytechs, who are going to bring some really amazing, I think, innovation to market as all of the participants and all of the accounts are available. As you know, there's one major bank live now. We're expecting all of the others to be live by March, April. So really looking forward to seeing some great innovation later in the year.
Now, talking about innovation, it's such a fast-moving industry that we've seen just over the last 5 years. A number of ideas that have kind of been tried, executed, and maybe haven't worked out. And I think a really great example is neobanks. And Cuscal went down the path of building their own neobank, 86400. Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about the kind of thinking behind that and what you learned through that process and how it's kind of helped evolve? Because we're going to talk about another area, CDR, in a moment, but how that process kind of evolved the thinking to where you are now.
Yeah, and I think learning's probably a great way to start that conversation. The reason we built 86400 was for us to learn as a payment provider what putting our capability in a digital bank's hands could bring to market. So, enabled with real-time payments, all of our digital capability as well as end-to-end payments. We wanted to see what a digital bank could look like, what great looks like, enabled by our solutions. So we really did approach that as a learning. What we did learn, and also 86400 brought a lot of data and analytics to that solution. So really putting customers first, thinking about how they could utilize data to play experiences to consumers that were going to make them more financially healthy and help them live their lives, every second of every day. So it was a huge, big learning. I think the things that we learned was that as a digital experience, putting everything together that we had delivered to them was pretty remarkable. Within minutes, you could be onboarded as a customer, have a digital card issued, and be transacting pretty much within 6 minutes. And so we were really proud of looking at, all the capability we'd built and how that could be played up. So I think that was a great learning experience for us. I think one of the big learnings out of 86400 was getting the simple things right for consumers was really what they were looking for. And I think that that applies to Cuscal as well. Like getting the basics right is what's important to our clients, but also from a banking perspective, same goes for that.
What really amazed me was the kind of the reaction to the sale to NAB, because what you've talked about there is possibly, if the HBR heard about it, a kind of standout use case of internal innovation being successful and actually returning on investment for shareholders.
Yeah,
and it was turned into this kind of abject failure of banks, they don't work and all this other stuff. It's kind of amazing, right? That it gets turned out.
Yeah, and then I think that story even continues when you think major banks dealing with legacy tech platforms, purchasing a digital bank that had already been live and now migrating customers onto that. So I think that story actually continues.
Yeah.
And we're really proudly still supporting Ubank and those customers on the platform with all of our capabilities. So I think you're right. And that story is going to continue.
Yeah. Yeah. So, continuing the theme of innovation, you made a big announcement just a couple of weeks back. Another, really good friend of the show, Basiq.
Yeah.
And a big news that you'd acquired them.
So we've, for many, many years now, believed that the intersection of payments, data and digital ID all coming together are the enablers of a truly remarkable bespoke customer experience. We've thought that for some time. We did a study tour to India pre-COVID where we could see that coming to life in the Indian market with a lot of super apps mainly, but generally speaking, amazing customer experiences, helping people live their lives in a much easier, more efficient, healthy way, both financially and all aspects of your life. So for many years, we've believed that the intersection of payments, data, digital ID could bring something really special to market. And so, as you know, we've very heavily focused on payments and have invested in innovation, are now the leaders. I think we're second behind CBA with volumes for MPP and connect half of the participants in the Australian market. So really heavily invested in payments. We have gone live with a CDR solution that brings some of our clients live for compliance activities for CDR. But the kind of capabilities from a CDR perspective that are going to bring great experience, customer experiences to life is something that we thought would probably take maybe 2 years for us to build and then obviously attract clients. And so we went to market looking for the best solution that had been built. And I think there's no doubt that Demir and Basiq have delivered Australia's leading data solution. So putting together Cuscal and Basiq, we think, is a really magical combination. I should say that whilst we have proceeded with that acquisition, Demir did choose Cuscal as well. Yeah. So, he had probably many suitors, and I think he saw the same magic that could be brought to life with payments and data. Yeah. So I think it's a really great match. Yeah. It's just started, but really excited to see what we can bring together.
So another thing that, when it happened, I thought, this is like a marriage made in heaven, is both Cuscal and Basiq are so committed to supporting the fintech startup ecosystem and enabling those early ideas to actually get off the ground. So Basiq with, free access to their API, and anybody with an idea in a business can go and plug in. Cuscal has been, really helping plug in the fintech startup ecosystem into the payments rails and landscape. We're at a point where I've been in this space for quite some time, and it's the most nervous I've ever been about what the future holds. There's some real headwinds that have been going on for at least 12 months now and look like they're going to continue happening. What's the view of Cuscal as to how they can support, this next wave and the current kind of fintech ecosystem, and make sure that we continue to innovate despite there being challenges around funding and all of those other things?
Yeah. So I think certainly with this acquisition, we see both organisations being able to provide a more holistic solution. So rather than needing to go to two different partners to get payments and data solutions, Basiq will be enabled with Cuscal's capability and vice versa. I should say, actually, Basiq will continue to operate under Damir's leadership in their premises as their sort of team, and Cuscal do the same, but we're obviously working on some really strong alignment between the two organisations. So I think we'll be able to utilise access to the data solutions that Basiq have and vice versa in relation to payment access to the Basiq clients. So I see it as really bolstering and strengthening the support that we can provide to fintechs and providing access in a way that they may have struggled either way to get those capabilities.
Now your clients as well, which are mutuals, etc. We've seen, in the US, there's been some really concerning kind of developments, which I don't think will impact the Australian ecosystem, particularly with the kind of upper regulations. But nonetheless, it does highlight that there's this kind of David and Goliath, kind of chasm that we have here in Australia of the big four banks and then all of these smaller competitors. How do you see that starting to play out now? And do you think that as you continue to innovate, are you seeing any kind of not leveling the playing field, but closing the gap on smaller banks being able to compete now with the bigger banks on a digital kind of experience level?
Yeah, I think that I agree with you about the stability of the Australian market, thanks to our regulatory regime that we have in place. I think that there are all the tools available in Australia to compete. I think all of the banks have been completely overwhelmed with a whole slate of compliance obligations over the last few years, whether that be MPP, whether it be CDR, compliance, general tech, cyber, privacy, all of these things they're focusing on. I think that now we've done that hard work, all the tools are there to enable organisations to compete, whether you be small, medium or large. I think that, like I said earlier, we are creating the capacity for any organisation to be able to compete by dealing with all of the back-end connectivity to all of those rails. So I think that, in the UK, it took about 3 years before we started seeing a lot of innovation come through from a true customer experience perspective through the use of open banking and open banking payments. I think the way that we've rolled that out in Australia is done in we've applied all of the learnings of things that went poorly in the UK and Europe markets. So I think that we could expect to start seeing innovation, but we're just at that tipping point, not seeing anything immediately. But one of the whole reasons for us to proceed with that Basiq acquisition was to really accelerate how we can bring those to market. I mean, Damir's already Basiq's already delivering some really cool experiences for his clients, whether they be, automating back end processes such as onboarding or credit decisioning, making things really fast for consumers or small businesses, but also laying up sort of data aggregation, the kind of things that you saw in the 86400 app are kind of now available and accessible to everyone.
What's kind of Cuscal's position on digital assets, blockchain technology, crypto, and is it a space that you see yourselves playing in, or is it just too risky?
Yeah, so we're already playing in this space through some of our paytech clients, so funding and defunding crypto wallets for the right organisations, because there is quite a big risk component to this. So we see it as a real thing. Australians are involved in crypto transactions. So it's here, it's happening. So I think you'd be foolish as a payments organisation to sort of turn a blind eye and say it's too risky, we're not doing anything. I think there's a whole regulatory regime that needs to happen before it becomes mainstream. And so, we're involved in one of the RBA pilots, the CBDC pilots with a few organisations. I'm not sure. I think our Reserve Bank are probably going slower, which is a wise thing than other Reserve Banks. I think we've got sufficient payment channels in Australia to solve for most, if not all, use cases that it's been introduced in other markets. So, but we are keeping an eye on that. I 100% agree with you. The technology, I think, is probably the key to focus on, and that's why we wanted to be involved in some of those pilots that the RBA are doing. Insofar as our banking clients are concerned, we watched closely the CBA launch and then pulling away from that kind of wallet within a wallet. That's something that we could explore, but I think there's probably a bit of risk assessment, management, and moving out of crypto winter before anyone's really interested in pursuing that.
As I mentioned, going to have a chat with Bianca now, a little bit about her experience as a leader. Bianca, the feedback that I got from that first podcast interview that we did, I think still remains one of our most ever popular shows that we've ever done. My wife, Joanne, when I think it was podcast number 15. So we were kind of learning as well. But, as we were editing it, I remember my wife, Joanne, saying, wow, she is so impressive. And look, the feedback that I get from anybody in the market is just how good an operator you actually are. The way in which you conduct yourself, the way in which you present yourself, but also the way in which you've dealt with the particularly the fintech ecosystem. And so, look, I wanted to have a chat with you really about your approach to leadership, because I think it's such a shining example for everybody as to, particularly in difficult and stressful times that we're going through. This is the time where all of us, have the opportunity. There's a saying that I've got for times like this, which is stars shine brightest in the dark. And we're on, some pretty tough times. I guess, look, the first question that I've got for you is, as a leader, what do you consider, to be your purpose in an organization?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Dexter.
You didn't blush as well, right?
I feel very humbled by that. I do feel very uncomfortable talking about myself, but thank you very much. That's very kind of you and your wife to have said that. So my purpose as a leader, I think, is really to bring the best out of my team at Cuscal. I mean, the only reason we've been able to achieve our success is through our people. So finding the right people, nurturing their talent is kind of my bread and butter. That's what my role is at Cuscal. I think in order to get the right outcomes, you need to have people understanding exactly what it is that you're looking to do. And so we've been really clear at Cuscal that our purpose, our vision is to enable the future, like I said, to deliver the connectivity and take the heavy lifting away from our clients. And so really getting our teams to focus on delivering the kind of solutions that are going to take that heavy lifting and are going to be really critical to enabling success. So I think that's kind of the sort of basics. I think, when you have superstars in your organisation, and we've got quite a few of them, really understanding what makes them tick and supporting them in their development, as well as supporting, their families sometimes when they're having to work really hard. Looking after our people is probably number one job. And I really enjoy doing that too. So
it's been really tough for leaders over this last few years. I think it doesn't get spoken about enough. If anything, I think there's been this real kind of almost angst against leaders who have been thrown in exactly the same situation as all of their employees. No training, no support as to how to lead teams remotely, and yet it's just expected. And there have been significant challenges for everybody in being able to do that. And still, there's still, I think, still issues for a lot of businesses and a lot of leaders around how do you manage particularly larger teams remotely. You talk a lot about connectivity, and the purpose of Cuscal, for its clients. How have you got that connectivity within the workforce? to be able to go through this period, and you're smashing all these goals, right? All these innovation firsts.
Well, I think it hasn't been easy. It takes, as you said, no one was given a handbook of how to deal with a pandemic, how to manage a big team. I think in the middle of the pandemic, we were working on 4 of the biggest projects we've ever worked on, namely open banking, Pay2, upgrading our switch, and moving our fraud system to the cloud. So as well as our 700 people, we had the teams involved in that. So at one point we were over 1,000 people. So to sort of get to the end of that successfully came with a lot of hard work. I think communication is really the key to it. No one has the silver bullet to it, but making sure that people understood exactly what was going on in the business, that people knew that you were there for them from a sort of individual perspective. Upping the ante on comms was, I would say it was almost a 30% overlay of what we were doing as a business. And that's kind of the general people comms, as well as individual projects, as well as just check-ins. Like it was, I think that's what got us through it. But it wasn't easy, and it wasn't always successful. There was some hard times. The connectivity piece and the culture piece is something we're struggling with, to be honest. I think everybody is. I speak to all of our clients and no one's got the answer to it. I think we're all muddling through. I really do believe, though, that there has to be a good balance of in-person as well as remote. We've adopted a moments that matter approach at Cuscal, so there's no set days to come into the office, but we do ask people to come in for moments that matter. And we have some corporate ones of those where you have to come in for our all-staff town halls, as well as, other events that we have during the year. And then it's up to the teams and the leaders to pick what their moments that matter are. So for my team, we generally come in a few days a week where we can work together. That conversation of hearing what's going on around you is priceless from my perspective, but it's a real balancing act. And I don't think anyone has really solved for it.
You've probably seen I'm pretty vocal about this on LinkedIn. I meet with so much resistance from people who believe that their individual productivity somehow translates to organization-wide productivity, or a team's productivity translates to organization-wide productivity. Why do you think there's such a kind of resistance and disconnect between what business leaders are seeing and experiencing and the workforce who seem to think that, everything's going to plan?
Yeah, that's another really great question. There is definitely quite a big shift from the employer dictating terms. I mean, no one would want to go back to that point in, I've got 2 children.
Yeah.
I've always worked for really, really great leaders who supported me. And, I worked part-time or I worked weird hours, but it's always been that kind of two-way street where, so long as you're getting the outcomes that you've agreed, when you work, how you work, it's not a problem. No one would want to go back to the point where people had to ask permission to work flexibly. That just didn't work. We have the pendulum has shifted to a whole other space. My challenge with that is that flexible work needs to be 2 ways.
Yeah.
And it feels with some people, not everyone, but some people feel it's now a one-way, I'll dictate terms and that's how it will be. And that's not what flexibility is about. Never has been, and it probably never should be. Yeah.
And the feedback that I've been given from pretty much every one of my network and the research that I've done has been that in the first 3 to 6 months of lockdown, there were big productivity gains, and then they dropped off kind of fairly significantly. And I kind of feel that one of the challenges that people have, and it's kind of a lead into the next question, is they're often doing jobs that don't give them energy, that they're not, driven by, they're not passionate about. They, and it feels like, hey, it's just this, I'm trading my time for money. And you get into this task oriented, hey, well, I've done what's expected of me today. we even had 12 months ago, the phenomenon of, doing absolutely the bare minimum in this quiet quitting thing, and everybody thinking, well, that's perfectly acceptable. And it's kind of, it to me, that doesn't seem from a personal perspective, because I know how bad that would make me feel. I know how much it would impact my mental health. What are the things that you as a leader have found kind of give you the energy? And as you've gone through your career and you've managed being a mum and being a leader and all of the other, and being a wife and all the other stuff that you've got to do, and the soccer drop-offs and, the shopping and everything else, how have you kind of found energy in your job to make sure that you're driven, but also that you've kind of, been able to deliver as well?
I think probably one of my worst and best traits is my determination. So I can't let things just be, that I have to get things done. If I'm going to do something, it has to be done properly.
Yeah.
So my determination, I think, is probably the start of it, and resilience, probably particularly through the pandemic and lockdown, where it did feel a lot like you were on kind of a treadmill every day doing the same things. I think for me, the things that keep me motivated are learning. So learning from people, learning from reading, learning from new experiences, which thankfully in payments, that's kind of every day, which is really good. And working on things that you can see are going to make a difference, which again, we do on the daily at Cuscal. So I think that the challenge, the learning, making a difference are the things that sort of keep me going. There has to be a purpose at the end of it, or why bother? And so that's for me personally. And then sort of bringing my team on that journey, I think, our team at Cuscal are also very motivated to push all of the great things we're doing forward. So,
you'd think we'd scripted this, right? Because my next question is, I kind of fell into fintech and became passionate about it. I fell into recruitment and became passionate about it. I don't think, my observation of people in their careers, I've very rarely seen somebody who went, I passionately wanted to be a lawyer, or I passionately wanted to be this, or I was passionate about the health, maybe it's the healthcare industry they're passionate about, but certainly fintech. It's not something you wake up, right, and go one morning, hey, I'm going to be in fintech. How did the fintech kind of journey start for you, and what was it that kind of drew you to the industry?
Yeah, I definitely stumbled upon it. There's no doubt about that. When I left school, I was passionate about being a chiropractor, then didn't enjoy that, became passionate about being a lawyer, fell out of that, and in fact started Cuscal as the GC COSEC, and quickly became really energized by what might be possible.
So I'm smirking here, right? You listen on the podcast, the reason why I'm smirking is my daughter, who's 11, wants to be a lawyer.
Right.
And the reason why she wants to be a lawyer is she's heard guests and seen me and heard me talk about guests on the podcast. And she's asked me about, well, how did they get that job? And pretty much everyone I've said, particularly females as well, they were a lawyer.
They were lawyers,
first, right?
yeah. And
I'm not sorry, STEM. I'm not doing much for STEM here, but
no. But I mean, there's no doubt about it. As much as we bug people, us lawyers, the analytical skills that you get from being a lawyer, as well as litigators like me, the ability to present arguments and facts in a really clear way. I think it's a pretty good grounding for most careers in leadership that involve communication and analytics.
Which is every job as a leader,
pretty much
right?
Every job, yeah. I don't see that study as being wasted, and really good grounding that I bring to my role every day. And so why fintech and why Cuscal? Well, this is my first role in fintech, and the reasons that I joined Cuscal were I was looking for a growth organisation that had ambitions and also a history of execution of growth. I was looking for something innovative. I'd worked for a number of insurance organisations before that, and I guess innovation.
Yeah,
Well,
like I'm smirking again, right? But it's, I used to recruit a lot for insurers. Yeah. And originally when I started this business, I was going to focus on insurtech. And after a year, I had to just accept that there wasn't going to be any innovation happening in insurance for a long, long time.
No, I'm hoping with CDR, maybe CDR and insurance will bring some innovation. But yeah, so I was looking for growth. I was looking for innovation. I'd also worked for a number of overseas owned organizations where Australia was a subsidiary. So not much autonomy. So I was also looking for a company that had its own autonomy, was in control of its strategy and execution. Yeah. So they were kind of the reasons that I joined, not necessarily because it was payments and fintech. That just was an absolute sort of hidden bonus that learning all about payments when I started was fascinating and sort of really fed my love of learning. Yeah. So, and then I think the enabling the underdog, as well as enabling, now we enable some really big organizations, but just enabling. And one of the things I absolutely love about my job is understanding where our clients are looking to go, what they're looking to execute to make them really successful, and how we can plug into that to sort of supercharge it. So not just learning about our business, but learning about all of our client segments, what they're doing, what's important to them, and then how we can be better to enable it. So yeah, the learning is incredible.
Again, leads perfectly to my next question. One of the fantastic things that I've taken from doing this podcast now for over 3 years is that how it's become almost an archive and a kind of learning resource for the fintech ecosystem here in Australia, whereas previously we didn't have anything like this. Now founders can go and get first-hand examples of things that work here, things that don't, the differences and the nuances between, say, the UK market, the US market, what's happening in Asia. There's a lot that people can kind of derive from this. But from your side, where do you go to learn? What are some of the podcasts that you listen to?
Well, obviously your podcast, Dexter. But I think my learning, you're right, you can kind of get it anywhere. Like I subscribe to a lot of email lists, as well as looking at videos, podcasts. I think it's really important to have a look at the global context. Yeah. And I've been very fortunate. I mentioned the study tour to India, recently done a study tour to Asia, learn about super apps and data, UK open banking, and then Stockholm to learn about digital ID. I think learning, whether that's, you have the opportunity to go to a conference globally, or, just listen to podcasts that are readily available. I think looking at what's happened in different markets and why it's happened, and then thinking about what's the problem to be solved in Australia and what learnings can you take from that is absolutely critical. I think particularly for an organisation like Cuscal, where we're looking to make the right bets in innovation. Like we just talked about digital currency. There's so many different things happening that you could invest in and go hard and deep in. Picking the right things is really important. So I think assessing what's worked and what hasn't worked in other markets. And sometimes those things won't work here, and understanding why is really critical. Yeah. But learning is really important. Reading, listening, traveling, I think,
Yeah. And when you think, right, when we were early in our careers, our options for learning were going and doing a night course at a college or a
encyclopedias.
University. Yeah, right. You didn't have the information and access to information that you do now, even though we had the internet and the web, it just wasn't populated with. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that absolutely blows my mind is the quality of content and insights now that you've got access to 24/7 on any subject. It's incredible. Yeah. Another question for you. So, mental health is something that's a real kind of challenge for all of us. It's something that we don't speak about. I haven't spoken a lot about on the podcast, but the times that we're coming into and just, going through my own experiences of getting older in life and more challenges. And, putting on the COVID weight and all of that stuff and, trying to get fit again. What are some of the things that you do for your mental health to kind of keep you sharp and on your game and, be the leader that you are?
Yeah, so I think my daily dose of medicine is exercise. So if I get up, it doesn't matter what time my meetings are starting, I try and get up and do some exercise in the morning. I do F45, so it's pretty intense, but very efficient.
Yeah,
45 minutes, boom, done. And I find that moderates stress incredibly for me. So that's kind of a daily thing. I also try and squeeze in 10 minutes of meditation at least 3 or 4 times a week. And that can be done during the day, at the beginning of the day, end of the day. It's kind of not hard, but also something that regardless of the crazy that can be going on around you is quite moderating and sort of helps bring back some perspective in the day. I think balance is really important as well. So there's times when you're working on a big deal or a big project where the intensity is incredible, but it's critical.
Yeah.
Like you can't really take time out. But what's important is then to balance that at the end of that, celebrate the success and take the time out. So I'm not going to say I'm great at that, but I do. I mean, usually your body or your mind tells you when you have to do it and you just have to listen to it. So they're kind of some basic things. I also think, when I've had to deal with some sort of difficult challenges, speaking to a counsellor I found to be quite incredible. In fact, talk about efficiency, like something that you can carry around with you for a whole year in your mind thinking, how am I going to get through this issue and how do I deal with that, can be dealt with in a month.
Yeah, look,
so,
absolutely.
I think getting the right assistance from the right people, whether that's a gym, personal trainer, nutritionist, counsellor, I think, especially when you are really busy, getting people who know what they're doing to help you with whatever the thing is you're looking for help with is really important.
Yeah. Look, as a business owner, I've seen the really negative impact of not doing those things and the super positive impact on the balance sheet, right, in the business of having a personal trainer, having a brain coach or a counselor, somebody that can go and talk to, regularly putting in routines around mental health, exercise, diet. They're so critical. And I think we kind of tend not to talk about them. The other thing has just been for me, like, stop drinking alcohol, right? Life seems to be a lot more easy. Life is a lot easier to deal with when you haven't got anxiety.
Yeah, totally.
But I think it's such an important topic, and it's a one that we don't really kind of discuss openly enough, right? It's not a taboo, right? It's like, look, it's just some changes in your routine that can have some really good impact. Yeah,
you're right. I think it has been a taboo historically to talk about any sort of insecurities or weaknesses. But I think if you don't talk about them and deal with them, they end up coming to bite you.
Oh, look, I mean, it's almost like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? That the thing that you fear the most, you kind of focus on it that much that it inevitably comes true. So, this is a podcast that's optimistic in tone, regardless of what's going on out there and whatever the news is. And I think we're actually in a pretty good spot. But for me, I've always found that when it seems the worst, it's usually the point, the ball hits the ground before it has to bounce back up. Yeah. And so I'm really optimistic about, the opportunities that we've got here in Australia. What's your view and what's got you excited about fintech in Australia right now?
So I think that I talked a little bit about that intersection of payments, data and digital ID. I see the fintechs and paytechs as the kind of organisations that are really going to make that come to life.
Yeah.
And I think we've got all the tools in our kit bag now to make that happen. Digital ID's sort of still under development, but, coming very soon. So I'm with you. I see it as a really positive time that, there has been challenges for organisations to raise capital, and that will probably still remain, but I think the kind of organizations that are delivering actual solutions to actual problems and are getting runs on the board and succeeding will continue to grow and be able to attract capital. But I think that the innovation that fintechs have always delivered and will continue to deliver are the things that will really drive. And I also think that the fintechs are able to push bigger organizations to be better, but also able to provide services to bigger organisation who uplift revenue. And so I see it as being a really positive cycle. But, there's a bit of work to do to bring that innovation to life. But, I'm like you. I feel really positive about it.
20 years ago, startups were funded with a personal credit card. And we've fallen into this trap and mindset that you have to go out and raise millions and millions of dollars of capital to get an idea off the ground. Yeah. Which seems crazy, right? When you think that back then, you had no AWS, you had to have your own servers, you had to send all this money on infrastructure that you don't have to spend now. Yeah. So I'm really hopeful that, this kind of rebalancing focuses minds, right? Yeah. Difficult periods typically see the most innovation. Yeah. Whereas when we're comfortable and things are easy, it tends not to result that way. Yeah. And you're 100% right that legacy that fintechs don't have is one of their competitive advantages. Yeah. So I think a couple of things, the tech, but also their operating model. Like they're born working agile. They're born working in a pretty flat, fast, dynamic way, whereas bigger, more traditional organizations will move at a much slower pace. So I think there's a real competitive advantage that fintechs have from a tech as well as people and process perspective. We're going to wrap up now, Bianca. It's been great to chat with you and do it in person because the last time I think we were... good. Yeah, exactly. Through necessity because we were in lockdown. But we get lots of founders listening to this show. If they're interested in how they could partner with Cuscal, what Cuscal can do to help them, what's the best way for them to find out more? Yeah, so please connect with me. I've got an amazing team of people from, new business, solution consultants, as well as all of our product domains who absolute SMEs. So reach out to me on LinkedIn and I can connect to the right people at Cuscal because, we're absolutely looking to enable the future through amazing organizations. Great. And we also get some fantastic talent listening to the show. Yeah. Most of them are driven by a kind of a burning desire to be part of something that is impacting the future in a positive way. Yeah. If they're listening to this and they like the story of Cuscal, what's the best way for them to find about careers? Yeah. Well, our website or again, me, I'm happy to deal with that. But our website has all of our upcoming roles. As we are rolling out all of our new products and services and also looking at uplifting our resilience and basically tech stack, we are looking for people who are really keen to come and work on modern tech, modern payment channels. So, that would be great if that came out of this, Dexter. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me, folks. As always, you can connect with me on LinkedIn and Twitter. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to give us a like and a subscribe. It really helps with the algorithm. And if you're listening on the podcast, make sure to follow us so you don't miss an episode. If you're coming back, thanks so much for your support. And until the next episode, keep well. Fintech Chatter is presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in fintech executive search. We'll help you find world-class fintech leadership talent to build world-class fintech ventures. And you can find out more at tier1people.com.